To start by saying congratulations to New York City. This is such a great night to be in New York, and a very special night also to welcome Roberto Tejada and Jennifer Nelson for a reading of the Poetry Project. Welcome to you both. Yes. Before we begin, a few announcements. If you're in town, next week on Wednesday, we have an event titled Padam Padam, the collected poems of Kevin Killian. So if you're around for that, please come back. And yes, and on Monday, November 17, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of John Wiener's Behind the State Capitol. And again, if you're in town, please join us. Before we begin, do I have other ones? Yeah, there are wonderful books for sale over there at the table. On the Way to the Paintings of Forest Robberies by Jennifer Nelson and Carbonate of Copper by Roberto Tejada, both available for sale over there. And they're both so soft to the touch and have this kind of same texture. Yeah. Okay, I also want to thank, so I'm going to introduce Jennifer, and Christopher Ray Perez, who's over there, will be introducing Roberto. Okay. So Jennifer Nelson is the author of 4 books of poetry, including most recently On the Way to the Paintings of Forest Robberies, which won the Autoline Prize from Fence Books. They're also the author of 2 art historical monographs and the co-editor of the art historiography journal Selva. They work in the Department of Art History at the University of Delaware and live in Philadelphia. I'm reading Jennifer Nelson's On the Way to the Paintings of Forest Robberies and thinking, she's doing something rare, something requiring sustained aesthetic and political devotion. By which I mean she's taken on the entire apparatus of specialized academic knowledge, the kind that asks scholars to divorce themselves from the world and returns that same knowledge to the world by extricating it from disciplinary enclosures, giving it back like a robber to our shared senses. More than 20 years ago, I was a student in art history. I memorized endless details about Renaissance paintings just to get through my classes, which I often failed. None of that information remains today. Scholarship in Jennifer's book, however, carries a sprawling imaginary charge, one that speaks to the reader effectively by dismantling iconographic traditions. This is not a refusal of history, but an effort to display the ideological texture of its enclosure and to re-engage it with critique, grief, and love. On the Way to the Paintings of Forest Robberies is a project of radical love and a deeply estranging experience. Suddenly, we're in a museum with a knife, slicing through the cold vocabulary of Western representation. Then you're a ghost wandering its halls, asking for retention, plotting a future research project, editing a CV, kneeling on the forest floor. Perhaps this is how one comes to terms with the fraught tradition of pictorial representation, by blurring through poetry institutional borders, ushering history into the present tense by actualizing its violence. What I mean is that this book is rooted in history while also moving against it. Jennifer's poetry displaces us and makes us strange, the same way that ghosts keep us on edge, alert and awake. In the summers, I teach at the Bard MFA, where Roberto was once my teacher. A core tenet of the program is that faculty work with students across disciplines. Last summer, I met with a painter who told me that paintings are forever. I think she meant that paint, pigment itself, an organic matter, keeps reacting to the life surrounding it. It is ongoing. Jennifer Nelson's poetry crafts that ongoingness, showing us how, quote, forever is made, the extraction and ideology that sustain it. She also shows us how to cut through centuries of stultified discourse, moving both with and against history, riding alongside ghosts. She keeps us alert, awake, ladrones redistributing our enemies' literal material gold. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Nelson.
How can you turn your back on me after that? That was wild. That's like the best introduction I could ever have, like ever. Thank you so much, Maren, for having me here. And thanks for reading with me, Roberto. Thanks everyone for being here, especially today, when victory has been taking over the city. You might still be recovering. You can recover with me. I'm going to read from some things from the first section of the book that Maren talked about. The first section is called Tenure Dossier, and it's the titles of these poems, you'll notice, come from academic stuff. Statement of future research plans. At some point, the ghosts stopped being a harem. I never stopped the sacred dance. I strung up the fight cage with chains of the small flowers that surprise me every summer growing on broccoli in the terrible stores. I watched my sweat destroy the floors. I poured oil in each hole, bridegroom, and screened like the moon. But the ghosts know I'm gone, beyond haunting in the intertidal zone, surf, addicted to loss. My remains perform my ritual. And they come out of respect for that, the ghosts. They hide their arguments in train runs and rain. Please surrect that person, say the ghosts, correctly to the priests. They never had a living master. Since they know I keep nothing, I am safe, like a Dante who won't leave hell. All night long, trains and rain. All day long, sweat and flowers. You ready for an academic writing sample? I'm gonna go for it, I think. All right, writing sample, the Boxer Codex. The braided blue hair of the sea weaves wide and indefinitely. On it, like pointed beads, small ships, bankas, carry naked natives and the things they have to sell. 70 years before Magellan fucked up a conversation, and for another 100 years from here, these people were called thieves, ladrones, before their name improved to Spanish slang for leg of pork. From the image, I guess, it was the smoothness and the brownness of their bodies that produced that name, right or wrong. I myself have looked like a lechon. First, from the roundness of the chests, I assumed these were understood as women on the woven sea, offering fish and fruits, and now suspect they're often men, but look the same as women, same hair, same no covering, same roundness all around, same face. So too, the Spanish and the galleon share a face across those faces and that braided sea striations. As from pregnancy or broken TV interrupt, scrolling along the scene, or single-portioned yellow rain on selected persons. If you hold the manuscript, you see the scenes of fold-out, the only one, that it has many times been folded, protected, kept vivid, hence lines, the greatest. Saturation is in the dyes of Spanish clothes, which must have seemed exotic still a little to the artist, given that the artist knew to make the ocean a rhythm of gradient yarns of sea and the sails of coconut matting, like a checkerboard or basket. No European would have painted those sails, or if they had, they might have made them look more functional as a later picture engraved for the Dutch shows tomorrow expert sailors arriving en masse and getting blown up, but mostly the tell is the sea. This is an East Asian sea between Ma Yuan style, Muromachi painted scrolls, pre-Mughal manuscripts, and early Ming blue and white bowls. Why write an essay here? For the first time I notice a bundle of rods like a fasces, dim in the sea against its weave, and a tomorrow person diving after. This is iron, the only good tomorrow people wanted from the Spanish. The point of the coconuts, the water gourds, the fish, the thing that's most amusing to the profiteers, the different market, that a stupid knife would fetch more goods than gold, that any weight of iron was worth whole contents of tomorrow boats. How intriguing that they bite. The ropes that grip the iron como si fuese un rábano, as if it were a radish, and with relish tie the reciprocal coconut up. At the top of all this, interrupted by the puny cross of burgundy, red cross on white, what you think of as Spanish, which flies at the main and fore topmasts, runs a flora and fauna margin, semi-repeating, though the bees and birds face the crosses symmetrically, close enough to peck. These ornamental borders come from made-for-export Chinese wares, though in this particular fake picture book of life on Earth, the expectation is to document what's local while demonstrating how the local color sings, especially the gold, especially extravagant to use it only in the margin for the edges of petals and parts of bees, outlining a red the way that Oriental restaurants continue this decor. I mean, mainly Chinese and Thai American, and this Manila galleon, folded out on the first page with its relations to the friendly locals, greeting their lightly laden outrigger canoes, is one reason some people use this word American to mean huge occupied swaths of land. The ropes that reel in coconuts and fling out cords of iron feel inexorable as rum lines on a portolan, deployed everywhere along the coasts. Catch everything, catch what's offered and web it. So I, of course, enjoy the bite, shown here on the left as if a bite into iron itself, and on the right as a severing chew before reciprocation. During this exchange, the cannons of the galleon stay quiet, though one threatens foreshortened like a button, whoever opens this book. Are you still in this open air market? Are you biting the iron hook? The borders continue more regularly for study pictures of ladrones. A spear comes out from behind one border, peeks across the left, a gimmick that the girl might jump out of the page. Across the opening, her partner with the top-knot hair and bow and stash looks ready to kill the Dinagat rat in the border corner. This rat is now almost extinct. Not that rats come first. In mourning with the Cagayanes, you get more gold, a hot midriff on her, literal idols crowning him. If I continue with this sequence, I'll repeat this. Bad anthropology, attributes, sex, and names. In last night's dream, the editor. Gib Var would not approve my plan. Meaning somewhere in me, an explorer held back at Gibraltar wants to make the pictures, commission more. Why else are there blank pages if I were emperor? Here the borders shift from jungle rats to lobster for zambales, butterflies green and maize pinned with gold, look in at the corners. What would I do otherwise if I led the expedition? Should I not abolish expedition? Should I not yell at the pictures themselves? The people of this land never had a king, and neither did their ancestors. Martha's texting me about the plague, the way I texted her about the fire. In After Earth, directed by Jess X. Snow, Isabella Borgeson set several tiny boats, first in the California desert, then in the Pacific, in 2017 or earlier. There are still boats buried in this sand, a vision of a holy ocean after the typhoon, and a double meaning, the word barcada, friend group and boat, or friend/ship, as she swims with hazel green eyes, underwater with a candle. Reminds me to tell you, barangays still exist, each polity a sailboat and community at once. These barangays, allied together, sometimes with a raja or sultan or not, within this continuous sea, which vanishes in the Boxer Codex after that first scene, but is implied everywhere. A waterway between borders, sea air in the ink, An ocean blue seeps through and rules the empty pages. The gray of the cannons returns late in the skin of a Chinese deity who is our counterpart, a general who records all people and their names and deeds and punishes the bad and carries through the monsters. Gridded up as the book winds down. Of course, monsters. You would expect these Europeans to stop the show with unknown beasts, chimeric parts, a small tusked horse with fire blitzing from its limbs, a top-knotted tiger with 5 tails where a stain looks like it breaks wind. The snowcat has the haircut of native women. 200 pages back, I could go on. A bunny and an elephant square off in skies, while a dragon and a chirin prance, their rainbow scales and hair ablaze. But no, the pictures end with birds. Shown here as meticulously as birders might today demand. At least one, MCO, I could confirm in life by purchasing. In the light of this day in a beplagued Wisconsin October, I could order a macaw that looks like MCO from the Pet World Warehouse outlet, 14 minutes drive away, though this facsimile creature comes from Brazil. The only Asian parakeet I could acquire is the Alexandrine bird, really named after that Alexander, who probably really had such a pet. They can live 30 years in a cage. And forever in mosaic, as the one from Pergamon, now installed in a museum sanctum in Berlin. I remember Gib Var hunching over a desk in those yellow museum backroom lights, consulting the maps, the ones he had and those to come, in a study room where nothing had ever lived except in representation, spread out on a table, which is always also an altar. In that parade of knowledge, offered dead, perhaps to the gray warlord of heaven, I could have no place. As I woke up, I was wondering whether I could appeal for a second review. I am a scholar through and through. The part of me still waking up is asking, appeal to who? Give me the last word. Poor immortal crane crouched ho. Danding he. Red-crowned crane leads a hermit along an edge of the air as a lost ridge curves in a scratched-up, mirror-sized patch of silk. Sometime in the 13th century, washed by Ma Yuan, whose studies of water passed on to the Ma Xia school and into woodcuts from the Ming, so the unknown artist of the Boxer Codex could rework that old insight into water as a gradient twisting through itself more than 300 years later. The crane is wet, it airs its butt behind it, the last few pages of the codex chip, paper fragments out. Beneath its beak, a wormhole flakes and only stops. When Boxer, British spy, inserts other pages for context in 1950, that is, another 1590s scribe is made to interrupt. With the local bishop's letters to the King of Spain and others, describing the need for governance and conquista, no, the crane couldn't be a portal. No, there is no door. I await the verdict through the accurate tongue of the last bird who has no reader. My God, where's my water? Condition for attention. Today the sun feels like such a gift. The idea we only roll around it means all gifts are self to self. Ear to wrist, blood must grunt all day or relax when no one listens. I keep beating the ground to distribute what it saved from the thunder. There's a whole other section of this book that's like just descriptions of artworks. So it's like the accross section. So I thought I'd read one of those. And if you've heard of Peter Bruegel, right? Jan Bruegel is his son. Invocation, Jan Bruegel's harbor scene with Christ preaching. Jan quotes his father with the proverb that big fish eat the small ones, as if to say he was or wasn't eaten by the past, but some of us want to be eaten. The bird in the upper right looks like a Stymphalian monster, unangel, not from here. The glare on the pic in Larry Silver makes it hard to see whether the break in the clouds is just expensive paper. How many people on the shore want to be misled, want a strong voice to take strong teeth and wrap a wet mouth over them? Not Christ. It's mainly the painter who believes, even when trying to escape, which Jan is not, in the power of transmission, but without exception in time. Iconography turns to grief, recognition into desire to decipher, to unwind the turbans. What happens? Unwind the turbans in that middle ground, unshuck the oysters, make a stand about context. That stocky pier in the corners, not a column, and I can't determine this world. There's a rope around a trunk, but the whole point is it doesn't lead to anything for sure, slacks into ground, doesn't have the tension you'd expect from a warship. It's almost funny. These painters, in all their wars and plagues, were mostly unworried we'd lose the thread, requiring the goofy art historians to slap each other's graspy hands. But I'm not laughing. I have wanted an end because I have wanted a different beginning. Now I'm on the invisible shore, looking down and waiting for it to come in, that beginning, the one that gives assignments in the wake of all this death, says the war is over, organizes shipments, distributes the fish, which cannot quote the dead alone, piled next to the empty shells that always also mean pilgrim, prophet, empire. Dear fish, please keep stinking of the sea when the story is retold. All right, I'm going to be super brave. I'm going to read some new work. Very fresh. This one, the title is from the beginning of one of my favorite art history books. I could begin, like Saint Bernard, by asking, let a human stand in the place of a need. A moon drifts out of a window frame. The enormous remainder, or remember, the pumicing of a page in preparation. A neighbor illuminates themselves. At 6 a.m. on a Saturday, the sky lightens, scraped vellum. You want to come with me to the roof to hear the birds reset the world. They crowd the well-chalked margins darted by gold leaf and acanthus. I told the student birds were anti-angels and didn't say it's been a long time since I let a need stand in place of me. Cars stirring like first light behind a postcard of the road to Eden. The fourth river says the real is a side effect of time. The third river is the primal collision. Kairos is a head that sometimes sticks out of Kronos's monstrous body. So I recently moved to Philly, and this is the first Philly poem I ever wrote, and anyone who knows, Philly is amazing. Anyone who knows Philly will know that the title of this poem is like the best trail in Philadelphia. The Forbidden Drive. I want to introduce a crucial misunderstanding amidst the eons, preferably a mistranslation in action or matter. William Penn turns out to be tolerance, invisible halfway up a hill, so steep the passage feels like a defile in half-left foliage. Light through leaves tells me nothing, but the sun's odd plie for winter, the cosmic form, scatters to sparks in the runoff's early gurgle. Here, where the Wissahickon crooks, I too will be absent as catfish from the Wissa Meckham as a hiccup, so suspended, a word is heard. This is what I want, bad historian, and as an evil poet, I also want someone to catch the miss, match the kiss, and measure the impact. In the video, the tree tips do not twitch, but in life, a parade, confetti. Okay, for this one, I think it would be helpful to know who Bluestone the Great is. So if you know, oh my God, some people know, that's a great. Okay, so if you know the meme, the Scooby-Doo meme, the guy from Scooby-Doo like lifts the bag off of the real culprit. The real culprit is Bluestone the Great. Okay, Ode to Melancholy / Bluestone the Great. I want to show you how painful it is to want the world to be better, but something splits against your eye. Ladybug halves, fallen flakes, like second corneas, can't get away from intelligence once you see it, trained to, aha, the bag lifted from the head of the ghostly mirror magician, the real, his giant chin. I've been staring at a mystical woodcut from the year of the siege of Vienna for almost 20 years, and only tonight did I see the man kneeling, held at the throat, face to face with stumbled Christ, like lovers. Only above this consummation in the blank sky can the timeless name of God appear. You are the soldier holding the throat, resting your sword at the point where your stockinged feet meet the toes of your victim. There's a sound a person can only pray while about to make out with, a completely embodied metaphor for salvation. That's what you feel warble on your fingers before you make the kill. God, that poem's so dreadful. I'm not really sure what it's doing. All right, okay. You know what? I have this really cute poem where like I'm trapped in a bell with Bosch and there's shadows, and I'm gonna skip that one. Okay. Oh, I'll read this one. All right, for this one, the things that are helpful, there's a word I'm gonna say, you probably aren't gonna know what it means. That word, when you hear it, that means shaped like a cat. And then there's another word, I'm gonna say D, but that word is spelled D-I-E. Okay. Non-practicing murderer seeks love. Tempting, isn't it? Okay. What is the German for Sally's fourth? Every night a jet flies inside the bedroom, so the only technique for interpreting ghosts is the wicked martyr, empirical, dressed as Christ. I'll be honest, I can handle ghosts in my dreams, but I don't want to tell you who I starve in the kitchen in the dark or who I wish singing in the noise machine. Iluromorphic, the taste inside the urn is the taste in your mouth. After the rotted planks held together by threads, a room overlooks a garden in snow. When you become the ruin, someone's pet will see you crying and get horny. The owner says you're weak, their pet will dominate you, but they're lucky you don't act. As if the sky isn't enough, shine the planets and constellations onto it, goofy terrorist. Still die dunkle Nacht fährst aus to get you, the god of one repetition meets the other. We must be theirs, their loving altercation. Hormone replacement therapy is amazing. everyone should have free access to it. Ode to HRT. Sex used to be in my poems, and now it's back again. The dildo made of sunlight, the dildo that unrolls the sun, the camera inside you looking back, tapping and blinking, pretty like a quarry that counsels the chariot on which you ride to it, where a silver tent flies pennons for the tiny mallet and the tiny stake, the world, the mind that consents, the sun that unrolls the sun. Thanks so much, everybody.
Wow, thank you so much, Jennifer. That was so good. I'm now going to invite Christopher Ray Perez to the stage, and Christopher will introduce Roberto.
I was nervous, but now I'm excited. Dear Roberto, addressing you personally might conjure the emergent radius from which I can reach all of us publicly. Such is the experience I also have when reading your poetry, as if the language you welcome as substance subject to change, as a medium similarly prone to chemical reaction as carbonate of copper, the mineral that ensorcels your recent book, might reach this picture of the world of us now come to mind, blue as in the sky, blue as ice. Reading Roberto, to speak to you in the third person, is to enter into the largesse of the particular, to be barely discernible and thus spared in person. Voices of the dispossessed announce our presence from an originary breath, exhaled as landscape throughout the borderlands in the key of petrified unrest, to quote Roberto, quoting Benjamin. This kind of monadic time without separability is in the poem Thread Time, the line here intended to split the difference between the vast and beloved, the instantiation of being intended for a body that holds and then releases the sounds it makes, which sometimes takes the form of a hymn, other times a litany, wind, warning, ordinance, facsimile, field guide, pathway, or a time to wake Michael, your partner. An intimacy I, as a reader, experience, quoting Daisy Atterbury in her review of your book, An Action Spectacle, as a kind of erotic custody, a fragile kind of shared time, a way to sit in relationality even as togetherness perpetuates its own unrest. Citing Daisy, Roberto is my attempt at sitting in relationality and documenting, as you document, turning to the Library of Congress archives to an image, figure 14, Carnival Ride, taken by Arthur Rothstein in Brownsville in February 1942, the same year my grandfather was preparing to land in Guadalcanal, some years after migrating to the Rio Grande Valley from Nuevo Leon. Turning to a John Berger quote that is the epigraph to the first section of your book, "The dead are the imagination of the living, and for the dead, unlike the living, the circumference of the sphere is neither frontier nor barrier." And turning once more, out of many, to the poem Season, in which the utterance, "I dodge, I take cover again," seems to capture so well the duress of accounting until I leave something out, another form of refusal. These lines being those that open another poem, Speaking Part, which continue relating a fable for personal and collective grieving. When I read aloud the previous sentence, I am released unto unruliness, joining legion, and I would be remiss to do so without also acknowledging how Roberto's own poetics have imprinted their hopefulness of form onto the citational chorus I'm trying to give shape to, in a world of displacement and surveilled edges whose walls keep away while closing in. Interviewing you for the Latinx project, you write, "I began Carbonate of Copper in the throes of the coronavirus pandemic. So from a geopolitical viewpoint along the US-Mexico border, And given the horror show of a global health crisis with its scapegoating of migrants that laid bare the system's capacity to dictate who may live and who must die, I sought respiratory realities and psychoacoustic phenomena by way of negative space, visual sonic splintering, and a consequent modulation of breath that could prompt a careful orientation to others, and to the mummer of the world attuned to the aspiration of justice. And it's from this place of deliverance, from El Desierto de Chihuahua, from Orphan Hill, Presidio County, from Houston, Brownsville, Matamoros, McAllen, Reynosa, and Marfa, and from St. Mark's Church in the Bowery with the Poetry Project, and those of us who have come together for this event, that you, meaning we, bear witness to the dark night of the now and the bygone, to family sorrows past linked to hazards today in the search for asylum in this place called poetry. Roberto Tejada is the author of poetry collections that include Carbonate of Copper, Why the Assembly Disbanded, Exposition Park, and Mirrors for Gold. His writings on art and media history include National Camera, Photography in Mexico's Image Environment, his work on the groundbreaking borderland Texan artist Celia Alvarez Munoz, and a collection of essays on Latinx art and culture, Still Nowhere in an Empty Vastness. Awarded a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship in Poetry, he is the Hugh Roy and Lily Kranz Cullen Distinguished Professor at the University of Houston, where he teaches creative writing and art history. Please join me in welcoming him.
Mil gracias, Christopher. That really means a lot to me, especially given our encounters in the Rio Grande Valley, which has really become a place. Thank you. That's been meaningful to me, and as you'll see, also meaningful to the book that I'll be reading from, Carbonate of Copper. I want to give thanks first to Miren, Arsenios, and everyone at the Poetry Project who made possible the opportunity to be here today and to read with Jennifer Nelson, with whose witness to all sides I feel close elective affinities. Marvelous reading. So I'll be reading from Carbonate of Copper, and my desire for the book was to dwell in the imagination of the Texas borderlands, as Christopher so eloquently observed, and to code shift between the gaps of space and time, honoring lifeways particular to the region's past, while animating an untimely world parallel to the present-day political geography in the brutal landscape of surveillance, law enforcement, kidnapping, custody, and detention. Although when writing the book, I would have had no idea the degree to which we're witnessing that today. To border, that is, on the feverish privacy of the self, in the variable speed of aliveness, a chorus of the undead voicing a song to that excessive quantity that cannot be contained by the violence of the here and now. And so I begin. Hangman. Green in the glade where the forest infatuates, where the children dulcify before they unnerve and vanish from sight in the story I tell to perpetuate in gray are the callous mobs that occupy the frangible hour of my crisscross, hour of my hunger to know, hour before the clouds irradiate, before the season arrives with its pine and hazel, limit or line dividing my easterly heart from a body elapsing in garnet light, intended to banish my lesion and thrum. And because the fable must end in demise, said the sparrow hiding inside the human voice in long drop throat for the missing word, for all to see the division of woods into flammable parts, and my mother homesick for whatever there was in deranged syllabics, a manic cackle meant to choke and to mortify. as though she'd been given a chance to come back, her ashes in lunge and recoil, the accordion keys in major scale. Remainder. I came to know it was my turn now to disintegrate below the tangled mesquite, and whether there was ever a story to begin with. Outline of a man, in deference to the pain that tells in night cover, a boy can learn to modulate. Petrified on the highway in scale, in sequence, in phrase form, evanescing liquid inclination in the physics of sand. Unresponsive strangers, here they are barely living, and what do they do to endanger is no talisman proper to sorrow's material disappearing, haze that hovers as fine as satin thread when land met sound, in time for transformation. On the horizon line, any semblance of pitch or rustle, the reflecting pool vibration off the road, blood surge clicking in my vein at the temples, plume of myself, effervescent in the field. Further amalgamates to the tonal brevity keeps me safe in the world, not alone in the company of my wish fulfillment, bright, keenly in quench cascade in bantam advances. The visitation here is the Mexican writer Carlos Monsiváis, speaking part. I leave something out, another form of refusal, the vacant field, arteries upright. The brittle, deciduous branches, my hand so far in the foreground, cages and bleachers, shadow shape in woodland green, awash in camouflage, pattern my 21st century combat desert fatigue. Was it Monsiváis who wondered whether we understand the manifest to me not always in agreement, unlikely diagonals, at a distance, in middle gradations, estimated time of arrival for the descending sky in softer assertion? Where is the vanishing point, blue arrowhead maybe of negative space? In the cloud cover, freed from my speaking part, I spindle and chant, ash orioles of fire, face to face with my species in thick motility, little vial of neurotoxins ticking in the vault. Now a whistle and bark. Now the larynx contracting my legacy of cruelty and kindness, fourfold pattern of my appearance, my ability to pose the function of persons, incoherence of a scene, bursting at the surface. I come close except in passing, am I brought to bear? I tend to think of the first person I in this poem really as a kind of fourth person singular, which has been used as thinking about a form of life, but in person. In person. My effigy in bronze across the front lines, excluded from the parable, suitable for action. Rather, I think now in forever present wonder, do I voice the discerning note, insane in the separation, or rather none, between tangle and action, between rite of entry and ritual for the wartime world over bright on my birthday? Hour entangled, how will I ever obtain again my bearing if I tell the number akin to my displacement and whether I was accountable? Who among us in defense of the builder, with the tactics appealing to our vanity, area of my square on the hypotenuse, perplexing double pull of self-denial, of shade and scale? I am inside out for a form of life, in person, in open air, brutal little side of my apologetic fold. I thought I knew to be hospitable, but in the overcast was my reflection. I entered the immensity of my whereabouts. I kept losing things in winter memory foremost. Please find me. Grayscale. Beam of light, An empty room, no, not empty, cloud, cone, circle, suddenly a set, and somebody suspended there asleep, animating with alarm the household objects in flush focus. Point being, my right ventricle, severed whirlpool of my motor cortex uniting at a higher pitch. The nearly inaudible lens. With a baseline click of burning, surrendered self. Outside, there's wind in the palm trees, a far-off siren turning on atoms, a 5 o'clock branch dragging the asphalt, also a single leaf concise in sidewalk tumble. If you are prone to forgetting a detail or direction, here are the scenes before sunup. A sound source, television, grayscale, gunfire. In strains from a time I recognize, but not as mine, the bark of men in chain reaction, bark and spit and menace and speech. I was barely awake. I was barely even a boy, my mother preparing for work. Already I knew the warfare. It was for her to inhabit the volume, an idiom of skin, out of true or incompliant. Prior to this, scene where she returns in half light despite the prohibitions a morning contains in sentences that fail even the swelling oriented to the audible horizon. Here in waiting for the whereabouts of father in lifelong debility of earth, in the coercion of a child given to search for it, anything. Impasse. On land inclined to ignite, I was given to wildfire, to night sweat, to ash-covered clocks, incinerated photographs. I attended the wakeful recital, now triage, arrest, distributive shock. In the scales I pursued from the school of aftermath and hearsay. I amplified my reputation of the number for alarm, for the enabled scenes of undeclared cargo, rumored to be gold in hours, for the eldest and the undersigned. I found myself disowned or missing among the persons I berated, but to whom I was beholden relative to the sound of something badly mired at the far end of my faculties. Last briefing leading, maybe already led to the first abandon and later admissions in the year I delayed. Was I an embarrassment or danger with my emergent properties at the impasse and subject now to no other law but to name the orphan counseled in my care, or as when to play the ocarina? I'll read the poem that gives title to the collection. Carbonate of copper. In the hours I was left to the elements, sorely colorless label. In the hours I was left to the elements, sorely colorless labor, evolving facts of a day, days now deficient in matters of fact, so many attachments of the tribe to the stupefying circle. It burns a new image of the earth, disabling the view from nowhere. Am I unsheltered and so out of time as to wonder? Am I unsheltered and so out of time as to wonder, does my face defy its aim on end? Am I the architect of this very small thing I derive or refuse from the 7 descendants? Does the landscape here obtain as when there was food, the field, abundant sun, summer green, river valley, chestnut, little balm, border, milestone, came the builders of a sudden identical twins at the sugar mill. It has a window overlooking the carbonate of copper on shapes predictive in the wireless ether. Tunnel. There to my right was the tunnel's wall work, emitting static shock, all hell it must have been, to the biomorph evolving over time. I was parent now to a generation in the grid system, ushering my daughter across to absorb the loneness and rage of human inhabitants who abandoned the shelter as commended by the holy book foretold in the floodlights from our drone delivery for survival. In the tunnel was the hand releasing her impossible grip around my emergence. I, the mother who made quiver all fanfare. I, the fix and fracture held to the crystal measure. I was the blood cell accomplice, contractor, and mercenary. I was as oxygen levels dwindled in the desolate corners, every airborne risk I meant to redeem with liturgical frequency. Or did I decrepitate in brutal contrast as an aggregate henceforward of air? The tunnel had returned us to the eruption of plasma from the sun and particles radiating into Earth's enclosure, the planet's magnetic field of muddle. Its density increased now with more particles that pushed against the satellite's orbit in atmospheric drag, pulling matter out of the pathway. The tunnel served once as human shelter, but no longer. There was barely enough room now to wonder in the early hours of the dark whether the threshold was equipped for us to safely execute the next pivotal phase to avail a person's fate in the fury of aerosol droplets, consecutive days by 100 count, surge unceasing, diminished perimeter between sleep and waking, circles of day and dilation, overtone of crowds and gray, except for the sirens and screens in that initial contact with the atmosphere, some sweep across the distance, maybe a suggestion to obviate a second or third attempt to release under the striated clouds over the downtown skyline. Season. Season passing from the one encounter, I dodge, I take cover again, but rarely succeed in reaching anywhere new in the landscape. Maybe if I bury the coins for those who live among us, unattainable in the subdivision between citrus and palm in the lot behind the emergency care center. Officials report a moving situation. Very quickly, I adapt to protect the citizens, more precisely as I influx when it falls on the government to help, says the bishop. On the chief of state, says the county judge. On the unvaccinated, says the medical examiner. They who seek asylum, do they carry diseases absent here? Do they fill our hospitals with need for treatment? Is the answer in our rage room? We've accommodated a selection of music for the blood flow. Here are the clubs and sledgehammers for you to break things. Every corner of this house for us to break things. Entrance. Palm tree, sounding brass. A building ripples in the slant sky, swarming with lifelike angels at war. In the engineered division of assets, firewall, smoke cloud, solar flare, drone. I beseeched all things in the ether, rehearsing the lesson I learned for dwelling in the underscore of my hidden sequence, fit to measure, fit to brandish my weapons when I ordained the part of me in error. When I was absent of ground for the encounter or effacement, I had knowledge of a world ago, birthmark of my person, oblique in opposition to the cameras I dodge, from the river overlook, all my attributes now particles of data converging above the troubled multitude that denounces my pedestrian opulence, uncertain when to attach, when to destroy. I, the arbiter, the cause of so much unbearable discernment. Examples harmful and extreme, I, the enforcer, of actions condemned independent of my motives, released from the nursery of what I once thought when I applied myself to the letter, divisible by blood, disjoined from the heat surge I choreographed? Or am I an orphan open to apparition, converging at dawn before the battlefield, after indignation and death threats in my quarantine, when I seethe in the unrelatable insofar as I levitate in light that sustains me, and you submit in the end to my hammerlock, my salacious command. I was here first. I was so in possession of my senses again as to survive the toxic propositions, but even seemingly victorious, did I underestimate the consequences. Legion. In the domain we built, where speed prevailed for our legion, overrunning the place by popular demand, our followers in the dark early hours awoke to a world in withdrawal from any tenuous basis in fact, none in logic, eroded by deserts, menaced by flood. They were prone to be hospitable to dogs and their own, the dying part resolved over time, but for the waiting outdoors, at the gateway, to hazard new days in the wrangle and undertow that separate a child from our leave-taking. Scorpion. From the entitled side of the horizon, you could sort of tell whether it was cobalt or steel I specified and erased, for I was embattled with my orbit on display, the retelling of a person, a conjuring trick. Now missing were the cobalt lines and crosshatch, and out of true was the metallic shade, to fascinate or bedevil the stranger disappearing already to the touch, as earth from my orbit, or like the gleam of Venus that led to the consequence of my cards, Atlas, Ladder, Scorpion. An order of mind so weightless, I abandon my lot for the blaze, now receding because I am helium. And I'll end with a song. In a separate system of loyalty, finite stars from the farthest galaxy that come into view as I'm adrift of myself, or someone else in the direction of one uncertain form of refusal, one degree of whether to agitate from the wounded place my species of animal yowling that allows for the fable north and south, for the X and Y of my genetic chances, stone under wave, an ocean cast in the service of sky, turn madly protective of the elements in my need to dissemble the slow modus of wax from the episode's great catastrophe of debt, percussive reverence for Ken, clay, shift, spike, hill. Alive to the centuries, my face in glass succession, I serve as the failing wit, even as I hazard upward to apprehend what was never of my other life, or ever once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberto. Thank you so much, Jennifer. These were truly, truly beautiful readings. Thank you, Christopher, for also your amazing introduction. I also want to thank the Poetry Project staff working tonight, James at the sound station, Gary at videography, Will and Heather at staff support, as well as our volunteers. And thank you all for coming. Please come back to the Poetry Project.